Welcome, ma'am. Can we start with the session, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Ratna Prabha, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, ma'am.
All right. So I can introduce myself.
Ma'am, 1 minute, ma'am. Uh, Welcome to the last day of the AICTE ATAL FDP on AI and data analytics for sustainable development goals. We are delighted to welcome Ratna Prabha M. Ma'am, as she is a distinguished leader in the field of digital innovation, sustainability, and technology policy, as our esteemed resource person for today's session. Ms. Ratnaprabha is a managing director and head of innovation and digital transformation for India and APAC at Societal General Global Solution Center with over 2 decades of global experience across technology, financial services, and innovation leadership. She is widely recognized for her transformative work in building future ready enterprises. Beyond her expertise in corporate innovation, she is deeply committed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. She has led several strategic initiatives that integrate technology with sustainability, promoting responsible innovation aligned with SDG priorities such as quality education, gender equality, clean energy, and sustainable cities. Ms. Ratnaprabha is also a passionate advocate of policy awareness in emerging tech domains, regularly contributing to thought leadership on ethical AI, inclusive innovation, and responsible digital ecosystems. Her engagement often bridge the gap between corporate innovation and public policy, making her powerful voice in shaping tech for social good. We are truly privileged to have Ms. Ratnaprabha M. Ma'am with us today. Her insights will greatly enrich our understanding of innovation lead in development and the role of a technology in driving sustainable impact. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ms. Ratnaprabha M. Ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining, and I really value your time. I hope I am able to, I would say, decrypt this complex policy and frameworks domain for all of us. So just a small correction in my introduction. I work for Morgan Stanley now, not for Society Generale. So I've been working for Morgan Stanley for the last 3 years. The role is the same. I still head innovation and AI for India and APAC divisions of Morgan Stanley. So coming to the topic in hand, it's a very, very interesting topic, and thank you for choosing this topic because it definitely cuts across my entire domain and the work that I do. For me, I think as part of my role, I'll just stick to my role for a couple of minutes before I get into the real topic. So as part of my role, I support innovation, of course, for Morgan Stanley. But most importantly, innovation is for business, innovation is for operations, and innovation is for technology as a bank. So what that really means is that we work a lot with regulators, and that also means that we need to understand the policies and standards of the various regions that we operate in. That makes the bank's ability to adopt AI really, really complex in almost every single way because we adopt to the various regulations, to the local government requirements, as well to the various regions where our clients operate. And that is complex and interesting for us to take this up as a challenge and really understand AI as a whole, and also create the policies and frameworks in such a way that we are compliant and we are not only compliant, but we're really working with our client safety in mind. And because we work in the finance field, as much as health is important, I know for all of us, finance is also important. So we are working in those kind of domains, whether it's health or finance. So we need to really keep the safety of our clients' money in mind while we put in these policies and frameworks. So with that introduction, I would really like to get into the topic as a whole. So let's understand why we have these policy and governance frameworks beyond what I explained as part of my role for AI especially, and for, of course, SDGs. Basically, it is these frameworks and policies are developed, deployed, and managed in a way that they not only maximize their positive impact on, let's say, SDG, but most importantly, they address ethical concerns and mitigate risks. Now, ethical concerns are, really, it can be a really, really long list where humans are concerned. And the risk is literally beyond human nature because risks um, are of variety, of a huge variety, depending on the markets and the sectors in which we operate, and the risks that we induce while dealing with the technology itself. So for all of these reasons, we create policies and frameworks. Now, before I get into the details, at a broader level, each of these policies and frameworks are slightly differently understood, uh, and these are not belonging to one particular sector. So there's a broad spectrum of policies and frameworks that we follow at a national level, at an international level, international level, national level, and that at the country level, um, even at a private banking policy. For example, here RBI, and there it is, the federal regulation in the United States. Our bank operates primarily in the United States, and then it is applicable at the various client locations. So if you really see, that means there is a small overlap of policies and frameworks at every level, and then there is a distinct policy and framework that is local to the private network that we are part of. So that makes the policy and framework domain itself extremely complex. And if you just take our bank as an example, because I represent a bank, um, when we bring in AI, I will probably make it easier for you to understand, because we met OpenAI as Morgan Stanley many years ago, like in 2018 or 2019, and we were one of the first customers as a bank for OpenAI before they were even a big company. And since then, we've been understanding their models, the explainability, the observability, and all of that before even working with OpenAI. For now, we are a permanent customer of OpenAI. But just for you to understand, when we look at a company like OpenAI, to bring them into our network, their models, we really need to understand how their models learned information. And the information is usually from a public network. So when any model, any AI model, let alone OpenAI, any of the open source models that you're aware of, Perplexity, Meta, Gemini, whatever models, all of these are learning information from the internet, which means they have learned everything from the internet, both good and bad, which is required for your sector to be risk-free. That also means that we not only apply the policies and frameworks at the level of understanding of our own sector and the area we operate, and the market we operate, and the principal business that we operate, we also need to understand the risk of the AI model having learned things outside of our private network. So with that, usually any kind of vendor model that is not developed within our own network needs to be investigated and understood on the information that it has learned. And if it needs to unlearn certain things before entering our network, that's the first, I would say, guardrail. So we apply the guardrail at that level. And then after that guardrail is applied and it has unlearned what it has done, then the AI model steps in. Now that applies to all vendor AI models that have, let's say some of them are proprietary models, which means they've learned on a certain set of data, which are private data. Even those proprietary models are usually put to test by all banks. You will see me talking mostly on behalf of the banks because that's my domain. Pardon me if I'm not able to talk in depth about all the other domains. But in our domain, we are extremely cautious about, let's say we have a licensed enterprise license of a certain software. Now that software has been operating in our premises for the last 20 years in this example. And then they introduce AI features 5 years ago. So they've gone through extensive testing on their models. Now they've included generative AI to the features that they have already. Even then, for every fresh model that they introduce or a feature that they introduce, we go through extensive compliance and policy framework test for each and every. So you can imagine how extensive investment we are making into bringing in any of these models inside, and an even more extensive investment in developing models are. So we don't fine tune models at this point of time, but there are other banks who also fine tune models. But any type of activity, like let's say whether it's fine tuning or no fine tuning, but the extensive activity that this involves in terms of not only laying the policies and standards and governance models, I'll come to that in a minute, but then even bringing in, that is whatever is ready-made outside available, bringing them inside a network like ours, we introduce all of these guardrails. Now, just for a broader understanding, if banks like ours are doing this, imagine the amount of work that the regulators are doing to make sure the common man's money is safe in the hands of banks like ours and any type of marketplace um, player who's playing in the market in the field of money and finance. So, which means regulators are at least 7 to 10 steps ahead of us in terms of laying the policies and standards and frameworks and governance methodologies to all of us who are handling people's, a common man's money or a business account money or investment management, as I call it. They are 10 steps ahead in terms of putting the right policies and standards, which will exhaust even companies like ours, which have already put in enormous and the best standards available. And then even we get challenged when we get questioned, and we are submitting, regulatory reports left, right, center all the time because we are a heavily regulated entity. And that applies for the healthcare domain and other key domains which impact people directly. So, with that introduction, you understand the seriousness of how these policies and frameworks affect um, take effect and also affect the way the companies function and how much we invest our time and effort and money in making sure that these technologies, which are hugely if I mean hugely popular, is need of the hour and is a must to have. It's not a need to have, not a good to have anymore, and it impacts all our lives on a daily basis, to make sure that they positively are integrated into our technology framework, into our business framework, into our operational framework, so that we are giving it back in a positive manner to our clients and making sure that we are positively responding to the various regulations, and that we are positively engaging in this model development, both with external ecosystem and internally. It is one of the key things that we do, as whether I'm an innovation head or a compliance head or an operations head or a technology head, um, or a risk head or audit head. We are all focusing on the same thing across every private entity, and government entities are even regulated in a higher manner. So this was mostly the introduction, and now I will come to the core elements of AI policy and how we apply it. Now, pardon me if I'm not able to integrate SDG directly into my discussion. I will address it separately because SDG is technically addressed. For example, all the SDG parameters and indices are followed separately so that we are submitting those reports. And so even in my mind, I will combine it wherever possible, but I will address it separately in this discussion. So the core elements of AI policy and governance is primarily ethical guidelines, as I just spoke in the beginning. These are large frameworks which emphasize transparency, a transparency in the way the model, we just spoke about what data goes in. It's all data. At the end of these models are based on the huge amounts of data that it ingests. So it's the transparency of what data goes in, because the model is spits out what it has learned. So that means the transparency of what goes in is extremely important from a governance standpoint. And then explainability of why it gives out the output, whatever output it gives, the why portion of it. Why does it say what it says? How does it say what it says? These are explainability factors. And the data privacy, right? While models learn data very fast and is able to ingest it in, the privacy that it needs to maintain as per regulations, as per client privacy guidelines, as per privacy guidelines of the nation, of the region, etc. That needs to be taken care, and the fairness. And we do ensure that fairness with which we deal with our clients, the way we deal with our employees, the way we deal with our government, etc., needs to be exactly maintained even in AI models, AI systems, so that they behave as responsible, transparent, and um, and they maximize the social impact that we as a governing body expect it to do. So that means this is the overlying objective with which we are laying down the AI policy and governance. Now, there is a huge core element where the human-centric design, while we design policies and frameworks, there's a human-centric element attached to it. So we must prioritize the human rights, inclusivity. If that's it's in our policies that we are, because AI can be used in so many ways. It touches our daily life in every way. That means it touches our employees in our office. It touches our client. So with the assumption, do not bring AI agents for a second, but otherwise it is 99% human centric, right? So that means we need to prioritize inclusivity, accessibility, human rights, continuously monitoring how it behaves, and stakeholder engagement, how it engages. AI models are engaging with humans, how it engages, etc. Is essential. Now, the regulatory standards. Governments play a critical role in shaping regulations that protect digital rights, that prevent harm and create equal access to AI benefits, especially in developing countries. So that is a must. And then, we also, excuse me, yeah, all right. Sorry, I have some kind of an installation that just took on in my PC. I hope it doesn't restart my machine, but if it does, bear with me for a couple of minutes, but I hope it won't. Um, And then there is governance structures, right? So governance structures, for example, effective AI governance involves multidisciplinary stakeholder engagement, which when I say stakeholder, it is governments, market regulators, various client networks, even in internal stakeholders. So all of these needs to governance structure, make sure that all these governing bodies are engaged with the policy and continuously revising it. They're continuously monitoring it, evaluating it, and there are multiple mechanisms to address bias at every stage, because bias towards one area may not be recognized by another area. So overall bias controls, ethical risk evaluations, model performance at every stage, because once you tweak a model a certain way, its performance needs to be evaluated at another end. It's like, puncturing it one side and stitching it, it might leak in another area. So we need to make sure that every point of time, the model performance is evaluated 360 degrees for every single change that is made to the model. So that means the governance structures and maintenance is extremely complex. Now, the impact measurement is part of the model building. So at every point of time, frameworks often include assessment criteria for AI adoption, for impact, for transferability, for business model and diversity inclusion. So these are areas where we
Yes,
do
Mama.
impact measurement. Sorry, yeah?
A PPT is not visible. I shared any PPT?
No, I have not shared any PPT.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I've not shared any PPT. All right, and we will come to examples of how we are managing all of these governance framework. But I'll take it as a simple example and explain to you. Let's say as an organization, we want to develop 100 AI use cases this year. If we want to develop 100 AI use cases, we are a large organization of 80,000 people with multiple departments and 3 major businesses. So now what happens? Each business, its operations and the technology will, let's say, they don't get an equal share of 33%, 33%, 30%. We want to address the major opportunities that each of the departments have. At the same time, we don't want to rush and put everything into production and just develop AI left, right, center. Now we have developed policies and frameworks. So as a simple area, there's an AI central governance structure. And just to make it really simplified, let's say I want to develop a use case. When I say use case, let's say it's a business opportunity. To summarize all my various client portfolios. As a business, Morgan Stanley, as an example, has investment management, has wealth management, right? And it's got institutional securities, these 3 major divisions. Now that means one of our clients might do business with one of these divisions, or all the 3 divisions, or 2 of these divisions, or whatever. Which means if we have, as an integrated firm, if we need to understand our client portfolios 360 degrees, that means one client faces Morgan Stanley, irrespective of number of businesses they engage with, we engage AI as an example to help us with it, to just understand our client portfolio better so that we can make the best best offers to them so that we promote their investment goals. So with just this one small example of integrating client portfolio reporting, let's say it's one use case from one department. So this integration needs client portfolio summarization. It means it is intelligent document processing. It involves portfolio summarization. It includes data summarization. So there are multiple elements. So as a large business and a large organization, we cannot let each of our departments just go ahead and do each one of these business opportunities by themselves. So there's a central governance that handles the kind of AI projects we develop. Hence, we have come up with something called as patterns. Patterns. So let's say ask pattern. Ask pattern is a famous pattern. That's usually an industry standard pattern, which means, let's say, ask research. That means I ask in a simple chat format. Anything I ask for, I get a response back from a chat format. So it's an ask format. So you ask for information, ask research, ask HR, ask for whichever, ask compliance. I can put an ask against each of the, or just to understand, I can put an ask policy, right? I can understand my policies and compliance better by asking questions against the entire domain of whatever is there in. So ask is a pattern. Summarize is a pattern. So anything that I have a bunch of documents on policies, on frameworks, on let's say on regulatory asks, regulatory reporting. So whatever I have a huge amount of information on, I want to concise it, I want to summarize it. I can provide all of these document structures and ask, and like this, we will have several requirements. So everything is combined as a pattern. I call it summarize. Like this, I have, let's say, 10 patterns in my organization or every organization, which means we need just to approve a business use case, which I have a genuine requirement in my department to use AI. I go and go to the governance body. I go and say, this is my use case, or this is my opportunity. So this is what I will save or derive by doing this. So that's how we build a use case, or a business use case as we call. And then we propose that this is how I want to build a solution. This is where I use AI. If I don't use AI, this is how I would develop. This is how I will. So this is submitted to a governance body, a AI governance body. Then they apply the policy against it and see is this area where you really need to use AI. That's the most basic part of the policy, where we understand whether AI is required. There's a yes, no. There is, let's say you all know workflows. So there's a workflow, you understand whether it's required or not. Once it is required, then the data requirements for such a thing is explored. So that is where I really want to talk about the data portion of the policy. Without talking the data, I don't think this entire discussion will make too much of sense. So in terms of data quality standards, right? So these AI models are critical. Data quality standards are very, very critical to ensure that the AI systems are using advanced, the right models of data and hence they provide accurate, reliable, fair, and trustworthy outcomes. As a AI model and AI system. So high quality data is a must, and that directly impacts the performance of the model, fairness of the model, the applicability of the result, etc. is completely dependent. Now, this part of the discussion, I think, is same for SDG, whether it is sustainable development goals or any other AI goals. I think the data quality standards and the high quality of the data requirements is kind of directly impacts both. Now, what are the key aspects of a data quality standard, right? Accuracy. First, data must correctly represent the real world conditions. That's the biggest requirement. And all kind of accuracy measurement should make sure that the AI model is making valid predictions and decisions, and we have valid measurements against what is a valid prediction and what is a valid decision versus invalid. Usually you would have seen most of the interactive models will ask you to do a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and that is a direct and a valid acceptance of a measurement. And that's how, that's not the only way to measure accuracy, but that's a direct feedback on the accuracy of what it predicts or how it predicts the outcome. The next key aspect for a high data quality standard is its completeness, because incomplete data that you feed to the model will give you incomplete outcome. So the completeness of data from any data set, for example, it should cover all relevant variables and examples required for a very comprehensive model training. Okay, and that means it avoids bias by itself. When there's no point in feeding biased data, then it will give you biased data as an outcome. So your data feed should avoid all kinds of bias gaps that are capable of skewing the results. So which means completeness of data is extremely important. And then the consistency, right? Consistency is also every time you feed something, you need to feed it consistently, because the more the volume of data, the better your model is. And that means the more consistent your data is, you don't confuse the model to make it give conflicting outcomes. So the data should maintain uniform formats and structures across even let's use feed it from multiple sources, Excel source, PDF source, external source, internal source, whatever, right? Uh, but that also means that you have uniform formats and structures across sources and time, enabling coherent integration and analysis. That's a big must. And then I would say timeliness. Data needs to be up to date, ensure AI models reflect current realities, which is crucial and dynamic. You cannot feed in data that are 20 years old and expect it to respond to current realities. No, you have to feed data in terms of the correct timeliness. If you're expecting to respond for the last 3 months of policy changes, as an example, you need to feed it data the last not only 3 years, last 1 year, but also the last 3 months, so that it can distinguish by itself what are the changes that have been implemented. And that is where the AI intelligence really comes, right? So the relevance is also important. Data must be pertinent. For example, in the case of SDG, it has to be pertinent to the specific SDG goals being targeted, and ensuring that the usefulness and efficiency in model application is totally relevant to the current expectation in terms of policy adherence. And then fairness and bias mitigation is another area where data quality standards must include mechanisms to detect, reduce bias, ensuring fairness and preventing discrimination in AI outcomes. That's a must. And then last but not least, the traceability and provenance, right? So tracking the data's origin, as I spoke about before, the processing steps, how did the data get to the model? How was it processed? And the changes that data underwent is essential for transparency and auditability and promoting trust in AI systems, right? So this is very important for any AI system. It's not specific to bank, but even to SDGs related stuff. I think this is how data enters and exists models from a policy standpoint. Okay. So some of the, I would say, the most common standards, frameworks, and guidelines are the ISO standards, right? IEC 9259 series. I believe it is released in 2024. I think these are the most common standards that are still relevant and being followed. This emerging international standard specifically addresses data quality for AI models, and of course that includes machine learning, etc. And that details definitions, characteristics, process frameworks for maintaining data quality in AI systems. Which so one is you develop a AI model and then you have to maintain it to make sure it continuously gives you the data. AI model gives you data a certain way. If you change the data inputs, the model has to be retrained, right? That means it has to again go through the standards and guidelines. Then there is also AI safety and quality management guidelines, and that includes structured governance, planning, operational checks, how you operationally check your models, and that is to ensure that integrity is maintained, the data sufficiency is maintained, and it's aligning to the problem domains against which it is operating. And that's all part of responsible AI development. And then the governance practices, right? The data governance practices. Every organization has its own data governance policies. Now you're going to combine the policies of just a pure data governance practices into AI data governance. That means an additional combined framework, I would say, that combines policies, governance frameworks. It you dedicate quality teams to work on the data quality check that also will have a combined effect on the way they test AI models. For example, in sectors like ours, models are trained for months, tested for years, right? That's how we work, which means that the data governance practices are heavily impacted in an AI scenario because the validation tools are literally, if we were able to manually check something, let's say we were able to check 10,000 records, and because we're not able to go to a million records checking, let's say in a daily transaction kind of scenario manually, but AI systems are able to run through all the 1 million without compromising on anything. That means that the validation tools against these AI models are do not apply to this 10,000, they apply to the 1 million. That means at every level it is changing. And then new best practices have been introduced, which includes data preparation guidelines. That means that if bad data feed in, there's bad data feed out, which means there's effective data cleaning. You augment your data, validate your data, and you use automated monitoring tools that will automatically spit out the bad data even before it is fed in. So these are all the recommended way to uphold the data quality within AI. Very specifically to SDG, I would say at this stage that there are, ensuring high data quality automatically prevents the propagation of inaccuracies or biased decisions that could compromise SDG objectives, right? Such as, let's say, environmental sustainability, equity, social inclusion. All of that are automatically taken care by actually just feeding in high quality data, which means you take care of it in the beginning. You're automatically taking care of a lot of SDG requirements. And then reliable data also supports trust and transparency checks by the regulators, which are essential for stakeholder buy-in and ethical use of AI. Now, a point to add here is also the high quality data, also enables little generalization of AI models, which means you can, from a SDG point of view, you can use the same AI model in multiple areas instead of having a private data or a customized AI model for different, that also adds to the amount of investment that you have, which means you have a high quality AI model that is able to play a general role across multiple areas, which is also a big saving. So it is able to work across diverse contexts, improving literally model transferability to different regions, populations, different SDGs, etc. So that's how data quality is, helps. Now, you're aware, I'm sure you've gone through a whole day of this topic. So you will also understand at this stage that targeting SDGs require a very comprehensive framework to focus on accuracy, completeness, consistency, fairness, and traceability, which we already explained. But it is also supported by international standards, ISO, and practical governance frameworks. But it also needs is sustainable development needs, which we will touch upon. So the way this implemented is same, but I think in terms of development for SDGs require a little bit of change, right? And that's where we will focus a little bit on how we do it for SDG separately. So there is implementation structure that has been provided by United Nations that actually has a complete, very comprehensive SDG framework that automatically, if you follow it, to the dot, you have an ethical, transparent, and effective manner in which you develop the model and you implement the model. But even there, I think there are some, safer ethical principles and safeguards, I would say, where once you define all the ethical principles for AI use, including transparency, fairness, and all of those other things I talked about, privacy, inclusivity, and all of that, you still have to embed a do no harm element. That means after doing all of that, you have to embed a do no harm. Even if you don't do anything right, you cannot do any harm. So that level of guidelines and safeguard is also present for SDG implementation. And there's a proportionality safeguard in all the AI operations and decision-making process, which means there's a proportionality safeguard means you can let the AI for different nature of work that AI is supposed to do. You allow it to do 70% of the work, 30% human element. You let it do 50% of the work, 50% human element. 90% of the work, 10% human element. All of these definitions of how much of human in the loop is required for one particular nature of work is defined clearly. And that is where I think there's an international standard for all very low level work, which can be completely automated, which AI can completely decide on its own and run. There is even 100% allowance, but that's only for those type of work. After that, with every complexity of the nature of work, where a decision has to be vetted by a human, I think the do no harm element is embedded. And the level of oversight and accountability that is taken is established by multiple oversight committees representing policy, legal, technical, AI guidance frame. I think it's called civil society, some committee. So there are multiple committees which are multidisciplinary in nature, who build these inventories of and logs of what they want to see as an output from AI models, the logs that it's supposed to generate, documenting various origins of data, various decisions, data sources, intent. Intent is a big thing. What intent is being provided to the AI model and the outcome. All of these are verified, evaluated by various committees randomly and in a planned way. Okay, so for SDG areas, engaging the government, private sector has got different levels of the frameworks are a little different for private sector and government and academia as well. While all of these, government, private, and academia have been engaged in co-creating this AI governance. So it's not that somebody or United Nations just put it out there. There is engagement from every government, every private sector domain, and academia in co-creating this AI governance so that it is applicable to everybody. And the implementation practices are standardized, right? So last but not the least, the regulatory alignment of the region in terms of alignment with the local laws. While taking care of international standard, the local law and regulations are extremely important for AI to understand. For example, all of us are touched by AI in traffic signals today, right? So traffic signals, it is governing our traffic based on local laws, not international standards necessarily. So that is being fed and understood at a AI model level, and that is being implemented at a local level, right? So maintaining high standards of data integrity, security, architecture, etc., ensures reliable, safe, and responsible AI outcomes, which means SDGs are governing and monitoring not only the data goes in, but what evaluation tools are we using? They're making sure that those evaluation tools are AI powered so that there is a completeness in terms of the way it evaluates, not the centers on records versus the 1 million example. It is always the completeness, which is the 1 million in this example. And making sure that the AI's impact against SDG standards are kind of identified in a positive, negative. So it's simple. Okay, negative SDG or a positive SDG. That means you're either supporting the goal or not supporting the goal. There is no 90% support, 70% support. Either you're supporting or not supporting. So from a best practice standpoint, I think, really organizations are investing in training, education, on digital fluency, on AI and AI model development and implementation. And that's one of the biggest best practice. The second one is regularly audit your own models and frameworks to maintain relevance, accuracy, compliance, etc., which I think all sectors are totally taking care of it. And then fostering, making sure the cross-functional teams across, there's representation from all departments and committees for regular oversight and risk mitigation. And there's constant dialogue between these monitoring bodies and whom we call as guardrails to guide us on responsible deployment, because the policies are sometimes guided externally. The internal policies don't change so often, but the external policies change often. So which means that we need to use the external as a superset of what we do. Some of the SDG related biggest examples are, UN has a United Nations AI institution proposal where each institution is expected to coordinate global AI governance and monitoring and leveraging multidisciplinary and basically providing those reports to the AI institution proposal. There is what is it called? It's called UN SIPA 2024, where the frameworks recommend principles that need to be used, where no one is left behind. That means it's not that one sector adapts it quickly and moves ahead, and another sector will take 10 years to adapt. That's not the case. So there is a no one is left behind type of governance where it emphasizes coherence with AI policies at every sector level. So that it's not one domain catching up, but all domains are catching up so that together we move ahead and move ahead with the AI development and digital rights. So it's very specifically to banks. Before maybe I will complete another 2 minutes and take some questions. I'm from a banking sector. So in terms of banks are really implementing the global standards in many ways, starting with the taxonomy that we use. We're standardizing it so that every time there is a difference, you need to invest in the difference. If there is a commonality, you reduce the investment. So with that principle, we are trying to increasingly you know, adapt to international and standards so that we don't customize. We help avoid greenwashing, improving comparability of impacts overall. So for us as financial institution, I think KPMG and other partners have really developed this matrix where mapping of various banking products and strategies that are relevant to SDGs. They have done a common mapping. This each type of investment product, irrespective of the amount of customization, has to follow the following principles. So just take it, adopt it. Life is simple. You don't develop your own. So that is a step that most big institutions have adopted. So also the common practices where where annual sustainability reports that integrate and provide SDG disclosures. Now, if you have those disclosures at every level, you're able to accumulate it and summarize it and provide it as a corporate report. So those type of strategies have been included and the kind of KPIs that we have that impacts all our portfolios. For example, has also a KPI on SDG, right? So that means that SDG relevant KPIs are part of the measurement. That's how we report it. And then banks are expected to assess and map lending and investment activities to SDGs. That means we expect our client, let's say we give a loan, we expect our loan to be utilized in a compliant manner. You don't, for example, you as a compliant bank are providing a loan. You can't use that loan to do an activity that is not a compliant activity against the SDG principle, which means we track both positive and negative impacts of how the money that we provide is used. And even there we are measuring it. And all banks have this activity now. And we are engaging our stakeholders to make sure that they are following our internal benchmarking and they're having external accountability to regulators as well, which means we are held responsible on the way our our clients are using and how the investments are being used. So overall it's complexly functioning good, I would say. Some of the key challenges I will end at this note. There are difficulties in the uniformity and rigor. Uniformity and rigor is different in different sectors and in the measurement and impact measurement methodology. That is. um, Can I request on mute? Okay, so lastly, I'll conclude with banks like ours in every sector, speaking commonly for all the sectors and domains, standardizing frameworks and making sure that SDG reporting is included and there's continuous updates and alignment to new regulatory and market expectations is something that we're doing proactively now, which is the way intent works, that we're proactively engaging rather than reactively responding to regulatory guidelines. I think that is the change that has really brought in the impact that the regulators and governments and United Nations is seeking from all of us. So with that, I probably can take a couple of questions before I let you all move to the next session. Thank you. Thank you for your patient listening.
Participant, do you have any questions?
I'm sure this is a very complex topic. And it would have given you only a very broad understanding. To asking deeper questions would be challenging, but I'll probably give you a couple of minutes to think of anything. Otherwise, we can wrap up.
Participant, do you have any questions? If you have any questions, you can proceed.
All right. So thank you all of you for your patient listening, and I can always be contacted for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We sincerely thank Ms. Ratnaprabha M for her inspiring session on policy and governance frameworks for AI and SDGs and for sharing her valuable insights on digital innovation and sustainability. Your expertise and the global perspective enriched our understanding on how well designed policies and governance structure can guide innovation towards sustainable impact. We deeply appreciate your time, guidance, and the real world strategies you highlighted for aligning technologies with the SDGs. It was truly a privilege to learn from your experience, and we look forward to applying these learnings in our professional journeys. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, ma'am. Dear participants, we will start the next session at 5 o'clock. Thank you.